This is Rhonda Rawlings, News and Community Affairs Director for 1073 Jams, and in the 1073 Jams studio with us today is Mr. Mick Zase, who is the South Carolina State Superintendent of Education candidate. How are you?
It's great to be here, Rhonda. I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Great. Now, I wanted to ask you, if elected, what do you think is the most urgent thing that we need to take care of in South Carolina schools?
Well, Rhonda, there's a lot of things we need to work on, but I think one of the first things that I will work on is how we fund our schools. A lot of improvements that we can make to reform the funding formula. First of all, we need to make sure that more money gets to the classroom. The State Budget and Control Board did a study that said that only 44 cents out of every education dollar makes it to the classroom. But the classroom is where the learning takes place. And as I've said many times on the campaign trail, teachers are to education what doctors are to medicine, the providers of the service for which the institution exists. Secondly, we need to ensure that the dollars follow the child. We need to fund students, not organizations, not programs, not overhead, not administration, not bureaucracy, but we need to fund students. And finally, I think we need a lot more local control over how the dollars are spent. You know, we have all these programs that are funded out of Washington, D.C. or Columbia, but when it gets down to the local school level, sometimes those programs don't make sense. I want to give the principals and the superintendents the autonomy and the responsibility to spend the dollars they do receive in their areas of greatest need. Because the areas of greatest need in an affluent suburban school, for example, may be very different than the areas of greatest need in a poor rural school.
Right.
We need to trust the professional judgment of our superintendents, our school boards, and our principals to spend the dollars, but then hold them accountable for student learning, because at the end of the day, student learning is the output of our whole education system. So finances is one of the key things that we need to focus on.
Definitely. Now, I've been hearing a lot about merit-based pay for teachers, and that is something that Republican candidate for governor Nikki Haley is really pushing. What do you think about that?
I think she's absolutely correct that people in all walks of life need to be held accountable for outcomes. Research has shown that there are enormous differences in the effectiveness of teachers. A teacher in the top 20% will impart 18 months of learning in one academic year. A teacher in the bottom 20%, 6 months of learning in one academic year.
Big difference.
That's an enormous difference. Now, if a child has a poor teacher 2 or 3 years in a row, that child is so far behind that unless there are extraordinary circumstances, it's unlikely the child will ever catch up. We need to identify and reward the best teachers, provide them an incentive, and reward them for being in some of the toughest schools where it's difficult to recruit the highly qualified and effective teachers.
Okay, and that's a good point that you make too, because I have an 11-year-old son, and I've had such good experience since he's been in school, but we did have 1 year where I thought the teacher was lacking.
Well,
but he had me to sort of pick up the slack and help him, but a lot of kids, like you say, don't have that at home.
your child is far better off being with a good teacher in a poor school than being with a poor teacher in a good school, because the variance in teacher effectiveness is far greater than the variance in school effectiveness.
Okay. Now,